Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our breakfast session. It's nice to see so many shining faces, and we're happy to start off day 2. Thanks to all of you for traveling to Orlando and celebrating our 30th anniversary with us. I have the honor today to introduce how to manage behaviors that impact the quality of your life. And we have a fantastic panel here today to talk with you about it. Our panel is moderated by James Poysky, who is a psychologist and also has a son with Duchenne. Joining him today is Natalie Truba, Andrea Miele, and Brandon Kozar. So I'm going to introduce James, and let's get the show going.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I remember when I was coming to conferences, it was touch and go whether I would make like the 8:15 session. So I'm actually really impressed that there's people here. So hopefully this will be worth your while. And what I'm going to do, each panel member, we have some, like she said, we have some very knowledgeable and experienced panel members, and they actually sent me a brief description that I could read to introduce them, but I realized that like reading off my phone is going to seem like really awkward and weird, so I'm going to let them actually each introduce themselves, and if you guys can tell everybody, a little bit about your background and what you do and what brings you to the conference, I think that will be a good start, and then we'll kind of jump into some discussion.
Okay, good morning. My name is Dr. Andrea Miele, and I'm a pediatric neuropsychologist at Children's Hospital Colorado. I've been there for 9 years. I grew up on the East Coast, but came to Colorado for my job because I love what I do. If you're not sure, if you've never worked with a neuropsychologist before, our primary thing is cognition. We want to look at cognitive functioning and all the things that come underneath that. So language, visual skills, visual spatial skills, memory, attention, and we also look at kind of broader like learning difficulties, ADHD. We can kind of talk about autism, although that's not something that I personally diagnose. And I've been working with boys with Duchenne Becker muscular dystrophy since 2017, and I also see other neuromuscular conditions as well. And why I'm excited to be here is to kind of touch some of my roots. I have a lot of interest in rare disease, and so I'm happy to kind of be coming back to this field for this week.
Hello, good morning. I'm Natalie Truba. I'm a pediatric psychologist. So I'm a clinical psychologist with specialized training in pediatrics and medicine or behavioral health interactions from our emotions, our minds, our feelings, and how that impacts behavior and how we manage our health. I'm at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I also started seeing boys with Duchenne in 2017. I am here because I love this community. I learn so much at these conferences, and I usually leave feeling much more invigorated and my cup full, which I need that throughout the year, and this community provides that.
Brandon?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Brandon Kozar. I'm a clinical psychologist, also affiliated with Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I'm actually the population that I've worked with throughout my career, both at Nationwide Children's, but in private practice as adolescent and adult. And so a lot of the work that I've done is very much focused on helping adolescents, helping parents, helping adults manage and cope with the trials and tribulations, right, that comes with life. And I've been coming here and being able to present and talk about these concepts of, managing our own behavior, supporting the behaviors of others. Last night we talked a little bit about community, and I think I've been here formally coming to PPMD conferences and presenting now for about 5 years, which is really, really growing on me, so it's always an honor to be here.
Great, thank you, appreciate you guys. And I'm going to kind of ask some questions of you all in order to kind of stimulate some conversation, but it's not meant to be just one way. So maybe we'll start off discussing kind of some of the most common things that we run across or kind of the most common concerns that families have when they come to see us or when we're interacting with them. But then maybe after, 15 or 20 minutes, we'll kind of open it up to general comments, questions, that sort of thing. I would also, I really as a part of my own experience having a son with Duchenne, I've found that actually other parents are excellent sources of information and advice. Like, they've been through it before too. So I don't want it to just be where you guys are asking questions and we're giving all the answers as the experts. Like, I would also like other families to, provide input about what's worked for them, what's been helpful, things that they've learned as well. So, I know it's hard in a big format like this to kind of have it a kind of open discussion, but I think it's really valuable in as much as we can do that. So feel free to, jump on board and contribute and be a part of the discussion as well. But maybe let's kind of, I'll ask kind of a general open-ended question. In terms of y'all's experience with families who have somebody who has Duchenne, what are some of the most common behavioral concerns that you run across when you're interacting with them? What's kind of the top three as far as what families are struggling with or dealing with?
Only three, James. Okay, make it challenging.
Okay, well,
I'd say the top concerns are emotion dysregulation, which plays out in different ways. Perseveration, getting stuck in certain ways, needing things really particular in order to maintain sort of regulation. I would say frontal lobe immaturity is a common one, which, organization.
And so what does that mean?
Yep,
Yeah.
organization, attention, self-management, the things that go into helping us function adaptively in social environments. And I would say, third one, last one. I would say language development around internal experiences. So how do they understand their internal world? And then how do they attach words or meaning to that they can then manipulate in their mind and use to help you understand how they're doing. They tend to have a harder time with that, which I think plays out in other ways.
Self-awareness and being able to describe what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yep, definitely. Anybody else have anything to contribute?
I just always come at this from a cognitive perspective. I know we're talking about behavior, but for me, I'm always trying to figure out what is also kind of behind those behaviors. It doesn't necessarily change how we treat the behaviors, but I feel like it gives a family and schools and friends and kind of a lens with which to understand. And so I always just kind of think about learning actually as kind of being a primary driver of some of these things that we see. Like Dr. Truba noted, regulation is a big one that I see in my clinic. As you noted, kind of, and the kind of frontal lobe immaturity or kiddos seeming a little younger than their actual age. Sometimes we talk about executive functioning in that way. And this is just regulation. This is regulation of our attention, regulation of our emotions, regulation of our behavior. Those can just really interfere across the board from kind of with children completing seemingly small tasks, obviously up to more complicated things. And I think there's also a social component then that also comes online.
Yeah. Brandon?
Yeah, and I tend to approach this really from kind of the parent perspective. One of the things that what I oftentimes hear and observe is, how's this, it actually does come back to a lot of the emotional regulation stuff, which is how am I going to kind of manage, right? My reactions, my responses. How does this impact my life? How do we structure? And so we're supporting the child, but also supporting the rest of the family if there's other siblings that are involved with that. And really, something that many of us, all of us, right, experience within our lives is the stress response, right? And how do I manage that in an effective way? Knowing that now there's in a different layer, right, of responsibility that a lot of parents feel and oftentimes are highly committed to, right? And so managing all of that within a family environment, it's complicated, right?
Nothing happens in isolation, sort of thing.
Right.
Yep. And so, I think this is something that I think people, over the course of the years that I've been involved with this, I've kind of heard different people reference this. Would you say that there is a Duchenne personality type, or that there's a Duchenne profile when it comes to behavior and cognitive functioning?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I'd
And-
say we have a behavioral phenotype that is a spectrum, and I think we see kiddos lay on that, but I think we see a lot of consistencies. And I would say that is true for their neurocognitive profile or phenotype. While we see deficits in certain areas, sometimes not always, but there's a reason why we are able to, meet with somebody in clinic and say, is this what's happening at home? And they're like, oh my gosh, yes, it's like you're in my house, right? Because so many of these boys have so many of the similar issues. It might look different, but the drivers are very similar.
Yep. Yeah, I've had families say, do you have a hidden camera inside my house? And so, in light of that we see this increased kind of trend of having this pattern of difficulties in kids who have Duchenne, what would your response be to families who say, my doctor said that there's no involvement of the brain in Duchenne, it's purely muscular, and if the child's having behavior problems, it's because of the steroids or because you're spoiling them?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
False.
Heard it. Yeah.
I would refer that position to some literature. No, I think we cannot underestimate the involvement of how dystrophin acts in the brain. I think not to turn this into a scientific discussion, but there's numerous papers now that I have like bookmarked and highlighted everywhere that actually break down the different isoforms and where the change in the dystrophin gene is, whether it's kind of upstream of exon 30 or in between, up to 63 or after 63, and some real changes in behavioral and neurocognitive profiles that really kind of hold up for me just in my practice. So I would refer them to PubMed.
Anybody else have a comment on that?
I very much agree with that. I think we are learning more and more every day, and I think the things that we are learning about how dystrophin impacts the brain and how the brain and body interact together, and then how does muscle weakness play into that from a how do we cope standpoint. I think we're really seeing a lot of consistency as additional information comes out that's validating that the brain is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. And I think there was a study that came out from Veronica Hinton probably 10 or 15 years ago now. I don't know. It's a while. And through the course of that, she discovered that really, in terms of what is contributing to stress in families and in parents, is really, obviously the medical component of things, but the managing behavior and the child having difficulties, in particular social difficulties and difficulty establishing friendships, that those were significant sources of stress above and beyond the medical component. What's your experience been in working with families and kind of seeing the impact that it has?
I do find myself spending considerable time talking about this in some of my sessions, and I think it's kind of a mix between, I feel like there's some differences that depend on how old the child is, kind of in the room for what we're kind of talking about. I think there's kind of an uptick in some areas of challenge, kind of like 8 to 10, 8 to 12, something like that, where there's some changes happening with the muscles, and school is also getting harder at the same time. And I think, and I would love to hear a family perspective on this and have my other collaborators comment, but I think at that age, the boys may be realizing that they're different from their peers as well, so there's kind of an internal sense of this like comparison, and I want to do this, and I used to be able to do this, and I don't know if I can do this. And so that's something that we sort of brainstorm. I mean, I always feel, and I think there's some literature that talks about how friendships, outside of the family are actually a protective factor for everyone in the family. And so sometimes, even though we're talking about the child, it's actually worth, broadening it to the larger scope of the family.
Yeah, I would just, really kind of echo that, as all of us have experienced, most of us have experienced, is, the importance of, that social, relationship development with our peers as we get older. We all go through a process of trying to tease out, who am I compared to then who am I with others, and where do I belong, and where do I fit in? This obviously becomes much more prominent for most individuals in, late childhood, early adolescence. This is where the peer group becomes particularly important. That's in terms of normal social development, that is normal. But yes, when there are specific, health-related needs that have impact on there that can cause impediments to being able to connect and relate to peers, it's something that I think that we really need to make sure that we're focusing on. And again, it's one of the things that I really value about what this conference does is it allows for those connections and allows for that sense of kind of camaraderie, right, that we know is critically important. And so, in fact, probably many of you sitting in this room right now can kind of relate to is one of the primary things as parents that, you care about is that you want your boys to be connected with peers and have friends and, have people that they can interact with. As much as, yes, we love our children and we want to hang out with them and spend time with them and talk to them and, get ideas of, what they think about things and their sense of humor and their takes on various events in life, we all recognize that it's important for us to be able to develop that with peers.
Well, sorry. I wanted to also just add that this is something, like difficulties in the social realm are things that we can work on. The school can work on them, therapists can work on them, the family can work on them. I think sometimes in order to find the path, and again, I would love some comments about this, but I think to sometimes find the right path, it can be helpful that if there is another diagnosis that we're considering, so if the child has ADHD, the reasons for difficulties with friendships might be a little bit different. If the child has an intellectual disability and or autism, we might want to work on it differently. So I do think we don't want to reduce things to labels or diagnoses, but I do think it can help to guide treatment in the social realm.
Yeah, very much agree with that. I'm gonna make one plug after I say what I'm gonna say. These kids are very hard to parent. It's exhausting. It's parenting is exhausting in general. The kiddos with DMD are exceptionally good at being exhausting at times. And to answer your initial question, kind of, I feel like this community goes above and beyond all the time for your kids, and you only have so much energy. And these boys are a lot, and you love them. But eventually you just get to a point that you're like, oh my gosh, I need something to change. And that is what kept me in this community. I was 3 weeks into going to clinic, and I had some variation of this for most every parent I was seeing. I just want to like my kid, and I don't always like my kid, right? And that's heartbreaking, right? When you have a kid who has a really challenging medical diagnosis, and it affects the whole family unit, the system, right? And whether that's socially or neurocognitively or whatever, it impacts the social system, and that plays out. So what I'm going to challenge you to do today is at one point, if you are somebody that's like, our family system could use some recommendations, find Brandon, because he's actually a systems expert, and he's humble, and he's not going to tell you that. But he's very, very good at helping recognize system interactions, and a family unit is a system. And so it's just as important that you, your siblings, grandparents, and all of that are as much informed and involved in partaking in that system, because each cog in that wheel of the system is going to impact the other ones. And so it can't just be about taking care of the boys, right? It has to be taking care of the family unit.
Something to kind of add is, I think it's also important to kind of acknowledge, and something I find myself talking to a lot of folks about on, what are considered like normal, healthy, relationships with family members, with children, right, with spouses. And I think one of the things that I can appreciate and understand that can be particularly a little bit more complex when you are dealing with a child with a specific health diagnosis is that, in all relationships, right, like we might care about each other, we might love each other, we might respect each other greatly. It doesn't mean we're always going to like each other. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree with each other. In fact, the people, in my life who I'm closest to, that I trust the most, I have not always liked or approved of, of them and their choices, right? And probably they'd say a little bit more on our side towards you, Brandon, in their experience with me. Probably think that's a fair statement. And just because, even with I have two sons, and I don't always like or approve of, them in the moment. Doesn't mean I don't love them, doesn't mean I don't care about them, doesn't mean I'm going to continue to be there for them. But this is part of kind of normal human relationships. But I think when you add in that additional health diagnosis, there can be this additional level of maybe guilt, right, that parents can carry, when they have those sentiments or have those feelings, in the moment. And again, having a community of other parents that can relate and understand and kind of validate that, hey, this is actually normal and this happens and this doesn't say anything negative about you as a person or as a parent, I think is incredibly important.
And I would add to that, I completely agree with you. And I think, in these kinds of situations, you're caught kind of in this double bind where, you have these feelings like, I'm doing everything for you. I'm bending over backwards. I'm sacrificing things in my own life to provide you with what you need and provide, to make your life as easy as possible. And then you're a total jerk to me, right? And you treat me like crap. And it's hard to not have some resentment about that. And, but it's something people don't talk about, right? Because then that means I'm a bad parent. And then there's this guilt that develops, or more guilt that develops, and it kind of can turn into a kind of a vicious cycle.
Well said.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to shift topics a little bit, though, and this is kind of going back to, it's related to what you guys were talking about, but obviously a child in a family is often not the only child. What kind of impact can the behavior of a child with Duchenne have on siblings and on their development?
Well, I think, Duchenne, other types of health diagnoses, right? Nothing, occurs in a vacuum, right? So a family is an open system, right? So we both impact and are impacted by others, right, within the family system. So we can't, I think the easiest thing to state is that, siblings are impacted, right? Just like those siblings, impact, the child with Duchenne. One of the things that a lot of parents that I've had, again, those of you, if you have opportunity, if you want to share yourself, we'd love to hear you, is how much time and energy am I appropriately giving to the other siblings in the household, when I oftentimes probably feel that a predominant amount of my time and energy is being focused on, my son with Duchenne. So that's something that's, and managing that and feel, again,
my
trying
daughter,
not to feel guilty.
Yeah, and my daughter once said, I wish I had muscular dystrophy, because there was so much energy and effort that we were directing towards my son. So I think it speaks to that.
But just real quick, though, but this is where I think kind of communication, right, just open communication with the family becomes so important, right? Just being able to be very verbally intentional, with the other children, and acknowledging the situation, acknowledging what your intention is. We oftentimes judge each other by kind of outward behavior, and then we make up our own stories around the motivations behind that behavior and the intentions. And so one of the things that I really encourage people to do is just be very open about your intentions. I recognize that there are times in which you may not feel like I'm giving you the sufficient amount of time, right, and focus. That doesn't mean I don't think about you any less, I don't love you any less, I don't care about you any less. Here's what I'm trying to manage and work through with this. And that can actually be a real source of maturation and development, not just for you, but also for your children as well. And most importantly, they start to understand that even though I may not get the behaviors from you in the moment that I'm looking for, I have some better understanding of why. And I don't make up, malicious stories in my head about it.
And we don't often think about siblings all the time. I think we're doing better, but the sibling relationship is so unique, right? They're with you when you're born, you grow up together, you love each other, you hate each other, they know things about you that your parents don't know about you, that nobody else knows about you, they're there for you, but they're also kind of like rat you out, right? It's a very complicated relationship, but that's just childhood. And then when you're, as you age, right, like your successes, your wins, as you're in your 20s and your 30s, when your parents are aging and when you're making decisions in those places, it's the longest relationship you'll ever have, longer than the relationship you have with your parents, longer than the relationship you have with your spouse, longer than the relationship you have with your best friends, is your sibling. And so they are immensely important. And bringing them into the space and caring about them and providing supports in a way that meets them where they're at and what their needs are, and especially in relation to their family unit, because these are complicated family units, is really important.
And I think too, I completely agree with what you're saying. I think it's a continual challenge to kind of balance between communicating with the sibling and engaging them, yet also making sure that they have their own life and that they don't feel like they have to protect you as a parent, right? Where they can't have any issues or any problems, and if they come to you with them, it would just be completely overwhelming and overburdening. And being able to, kind of allow them that space to also mess up and to have difficulties and that sort of thing, in a sense of freedom, and not feel like they're just increasing your burden or feeling like they have to sometimes be the ones responsible for managing their siblings' emotions or behavior or that sort of thing.
So this brings up a little bit of a funny anecdote. A couple years ago, at one of these conferences, I was speaking to a couple parents, and they were kind of talking about this with their older daughter, right? So it's a little bit of the older sibling, right, syndrome that kind of goes in there, but particularly with this diagnosis, right, I think it just kind of adds to that. And they were concerned because, she almost had kind of taken on almost like that kind of parental pressure, right, of like, I have to be very responsible and just be prudent and diligent in everything that I do. And they're, basically asking for advice, like, what can we, say to her, right, to try to help, because
chill out a little
the
bit.
anxiety, right? It was like, chill out. And I said, just encourage her to be a little bit more irresponsible every once in a while. It's like show up late.
Yeah.
Just, you got homework tonight? Don't do it. And I know you're all like appalled by that, idea, but it's when it comes to this kind of unique circumstance, sometimes a paradoxical approach, what it almost does is it gives the child permission to say, okay, I don't have to be perfect all the time.
And the world didn't collapse. And things are okay. And I still got a good grade, right?
Yeah, they're still probably doing great.
Yeah. No, that story hits the nail on the head. So one last thing before we kind of open it up to everybody, and this is a loaded question, so I apologize. So oftentimes at conferences or other situations where I give a presentation about the different kinds of behavior patterns that we see and the different things for people to look for and different things to consider, at the end of it, and I completely respect this, I'm not making light of it at all, but at the end of it, usually the first question is, okay, now what do we do about it, right? So I'm going to direct that to you guys, which I realize that's a really difficult question. So what would be your response to families who ask you that? Okay, so we understand this. We understand there's a history of, or an increased risk of problems. These are the kinds of problems that can occur. Where do we go from here?
I think I would start with, the first advice is kind of putting together your people. I think it's a big scope, though. I think it's the family, the immediate family unit, and then it's the extended family unit potentially. It's the school, and then it's your medical care team who depending on there can be access difficulties, kind of depending on certain areas and staffing at certain places, and so that can be hard. But I think sort of never giving up, and if there's something that you feel like you need answers about. We were kind of just talking a little bit earlier that, tele can kind of give us sometimes access to things that we might not be able to access otherwise. There are definitely pros and cons to that as a medium for treatment, but I think I tend to talk about it as like a let's get organized. Let's get organized and have our people and ask a lot of questions. I always say, you should come in already with questions prepared, because then when you're talking to somebody, there's a lot of information coming at you. You're giving a lot of information, and then it's like, okay, anything else? And I just see this look of, I know I have things, but I don't know what to ask. But I know when I leave 3 minutes later when I'm walking to my car, I'm going to think of 12 questions. And so I don't want that to happen to families, and I want you to feel like you get the most out of your time. So that's kind of where I would start.
That is a tough question. So I'm going to avoid the individual getting into what can we do for the boys, because that could be robust depending on presenting problem and age and all the things. So what I will encourage is genuine self-reflection analysis and recognizing where are my strengths and weaknesses as a parent? Where do I need to bolster maybe some of my parenting approaches as Not because you don't know, but these are kids that need specialized kind of parenting skills.
Where do I need some additional tools?
Yeah, additional tools, sort of like the Navy SEAL parenting skills, we could say. And that self-analysis, whether that's through friendship or your people that know you well, or a family-based therapist or an individual-based therapist, can be really helpful, because there are times that the things that we're not good at like play out, right? Like, so if you're somebody that's easily dysregulated, and that's hard for you to like tolerate your child's distress, it's going to be really hard for you to parent around that distress, right? So finding ways that you can improve your own internal functioning will largely benefit your children in ways that it's hard to appreciate up front, but it takes like genuine openness and willingness to be like, okay, where can I shine a light and say, like, I'm good at this and this is something I need to work on?
Find others that you feel can relate and understand, much more what you're going through, are in a similar boat. That's always the first advice is, and again, that's one of the reasons why I'm so supportive of this community here, is because it does provide a community to find others. Not only are we able to kind of then see each other physically at these types of conferences, right, but hopefully we're able to connect, whether it's text message, email, video chat, right, in between conferences. I think that's important. The other thing is let go of this idea of what I call kind of the single solution myth, this idea that there's a single solution that answers all, that provides all answers. We all know this, right? Life is, every day brings its new opportunities and challenges. And so therefore, having services available, seeking counsel yourself, right? Professional services, having someone that you can, as parents, talk to and work through. One of the value that I think that I've been fortunate to be able to provide many people for a lot of different types of scenarios and reasons over the years is a private, confidential space where they can just be their honest, real selves and not have to worry about the consequences or judgment, associated with that. That in itself is actually quite freeing for a lot of individuals. And if you're reluctant, or I don't know if I want to go see someone, what does that mean? What does that say? Like, one of the things I try to kind of just remind folks is that in life, wise people seek counsel. If you need legal advice, right? What do wise people do? They seek legal counsel. If you need financial advice, you seek financial counsel. If you have specific medical advice, right, what do we do, right? As you all know, right, you seek specific medical counsel. When it comes to emotional and behavioral or social needs, wise people seek counsel. So I guess the one thing to not do is try to convince yourself that, well, I don't want to talk to someone because who cares about me, or that's a sign of weakness, or these types of things that ultimately just prevents people from being and get the support that not only you deserve, but then would be really the source of being able to provide a lot of those tools and answers in those moments as inevitably life pops up.
Yep. So kind of, I think what I hear you saying is have a plan, right? Assemble the right people, but make sure that you're kind of focusing on small, realistic steps and having the right people to help you do that. Take care of yourself, recharge your own batteries, and have backup, if I could summarize. Yeah? Okay.
And when you inevitably screw up, give yourself a little bit of grace. You're
and
human.
Give yourself some grace. Yep, definitely. I do that a lot.
We will all screw up, won't we?
Yeah.
We will all screw up.
I give myself a lot of grace.
Right?
Yeah.
Ooh, winning or learning. I like it.
All right. Well, I'd like to open it up to anybody else. If anybody else has questions or comments, or I know it can be a little bit intimidating to step up to the microphone, but we have one over here, and we've got one right here too.
I'll do it. I'll give him my half smile.
And you have to bear with us. Like the lights are really bright, and so it's kind of like we're being interrogated. So sorry if
Well, our son Michael was diagnosed with autism at 3 years old, and Becker's muscular dystrophy from that whole initial thing came out at 4. And I appreciate the second woman there. The circle of, well, I created the circle of friends, and everything was done very well from, I had to write it down here, pre-K through high school. And then, you become an adult, and, he goes to a community college still, even though he's 27 years old. He's on, I call the long track to the associate's degree. And I was always a helicopter mom. I don't know if anyone knows what that means. I was
Yep.
accused of being a helicopter mom. And so I'm like, independence. So yes, Michael is completely independent, but it's that social thing. The circle of friends I talked to Brendan about this, has gone down to like me, my husband, and my son. No siblings. Yes, cousins, but they're all off on their own lives, and it's just like, how. And I was told that it's not very common for children with autism to also have dystrophy. And I'm hearing that when you talked about the frontal lobe, yeah, he does have frontal lobe abnormalities that was found when he was young. He never had seizures. So, I mean, I don't even know where I'm going with this. It's like, I found this community here will probably be the one that helps. But in the 23 years that we've been going to Children's Hospital, no one ever mentioned this group to us until, so this isn't really a question. I guess I'm on a soapbox. So I just want to know how many kids with Becker's also have autism.
So my response back is going to be one number that I think I read from one paper, so but 15% is one number that I have in my head.
That's a lot more than none.
And it's more than none, and it's more than is reported in the general population.
And what you're speaking to about, no, I agree. I think if we even move away from like diagnostic label to features or characteristic, it goes up to like 50 to 60% or something like that in some of those papers. But there's a wide range, depending on how it's described or reported. But it's I would say like definitely not uncommon. We're not surprised when we see that sort of diagnosis or something like we see very consistent features, maybe not meeting full criteria, but very similar features. But what you're speaking to about how do we support our adults from a social standpoint is incredibly important, and that's your son is not the only one that kind of finds themselves in that position, where as they get out of high school and they're living into adulthood, living their life that gets smaller and smaller, their social circle, and they get more reclusive, and then they kind of start to lose those opportunities to even try to rebuild that, right? And that's something I think many people in the community are struggling with.
Yeah, there's, I think, when you're younger age, you're going to school, there's just a lot more opportunity to develop those connections, right? But as you get older, obviously, you finish those kind of milestones, and you don't have that same opportunity. I also think, too, my experience has been, in those kinds of situations, there's I don't know if temptation is the right word, but there's a tendency for people to want to start to narrow their world more and more because it feels comfortable, like it's less anxiety producing. And so, I think as a parent in those situations, you want to try to strike a balance between pushing them out of their comfort zone a little bit, even if it's just to kind of maintain where they are, right? You don't want to do it so much that you completely overwhelm them, but you do have to be more intentional about it, I think, as much as you can, just to keep them doing stuff, because there is that temptation for them to kind of spend more and more time at home or to do less and less things. But it's hard to find that balance, right? Because oftentimes they tend to be resistant to that.
Well, everyone tells me how active he is. Yes, he's a musician. Yes, he goes to South Shore Conservatory and is in a choir and is in this and is in that. But it never leaves that the way in high school it was like the band kids all got together on Friday night.
Right.
Well, there's no more, band kids. And then there's just a monthly social group where I used to do the weekly social group. Yeah. And he seems happy no matter what, but it concerns me because a lot of people outwardly seem happy, and then, so I think what I learned yesterday is it would be good to get some mental health counseling. As I'm sitting here almost crying again, I better leave the microphone.
It's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, but you're doing good things, though. Like, you're thinking about the right things. Mm-hmm.
You got some questions over here?
Hi, I'm Amelia Beasley. I have 2 sons with Duchenne, and I'm a carrier. I'm a late diagnosis autism ADHD, as I think a lot of millennials are, millennial women. But I guess my question is, I find myself having a lot of trouble with 3 people in our house having Duchenne brain, as I say. I find a lot of similarities with myself and my kids. And I'm wondering, is there literature or studies for, about carriers who are experiencing similar, behavioral and mental or cognitive, phenotypes, if you will? And, are there, things that can guide our own mental health professionals who are helping, could I give to my counselor to help kind of understand me a bit better? Or what are the resources, I guess, for carriers to kind of help us do that self-reflection and improve upon our own skills?
So yes, there are researchers working on that. There's some things that aren't out yet, but it's definitely an area that we're putting a lot more investment in and trying to understand the neurocognitive profiles of manifesting female carriers and then just female carriers in general, but your experiences are spot on, right? And very valid and very challenging when you think about how do I help a mental health professional understand where I'm coming from. What I encourage my moms to do is to take the information that we talk about the boys and how their brain's impacted from emotion regulation and some of those problems and give that to the therapist and say, like, my brain is very similar in a less intense way, right? But then understanding the bi-directional feedback you have with the biological kiddo, right? And knowing that, like, you're just going to be doing this, even if you're trying not to, right? You're faking it till you make it and you're like, no, be cool, be cool. Your body's still reacting, right? Your body betrays you in that way. And so having them understand that it's like this bi-direction, so it's not just you, right? So you could be doing everything right, and then your kid kind of goes, and your body's like, is really important.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Erica. Hello, Erica Rome. My son is 10, and my question is, his behavior is sort of cyclical. It goes up, it goes down, like periods of doing well, periods of, having, like, throwing things, screaming, yelling. At what point do you consider medication? And then at that point, some of his physicians are hesitant because of cardiac involvement and stuff like that. At what point do you turn to medication as well as therapy?
That's a really good question. I think for these boys, my graduate program would disown me if they heard this, but I think there are boys in this community that really need medications to kind of calm and regulate the biophysiological processes so they can actually engage in therapy and do better. And they can come off that later, some of those meds, but sometimes it's really needed. So I would say if you're engaging in therapy and you're doing the things and you're not seeing improvements, like within months, that it might be worthwhile to consider. I would work closely with your neuromuscular team around the medications, encourage your providers to read the standards of care. The Lancet articles, like it lays out medications and the safety about them and those things that should help providers feel more comfortable on, where do we think about medications and when do we maybe start them and how do we surveil and make sure that we're being safe. But there are medication classes that are very well tolerated and not necessarily very risk associated that would potentially be very beneficial.
Keep in mind, this is neurological, right? Like this is a medical condition that's affecting the brain. And sometimes you have to address the biology of it, really for other things to work as well. Kind of non-medical approaches like behavioral therapies and that sort of thing. So, quality of life is just as important as other aspects of life, not just for the kid, but for the whole family. And so, obviously we don't want to do anything that's going to really increase, risk of harm or that sort of thing. But at the same time, we can't minimize how important it is to be able to function in different situations and control ourselves and, for making sure that parents are not in the fetal position in the corner because they're so exhausted. So, I think you have to, keep all of those things in mind. But I find in most situations, families can find something that the child can tolerate that can at least help. Now, it's not like a magic wand or silver bullet or something like that, but even a little bit better is better. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Thank you.
And I apologize, we have to kind of wrap up. So sorry if there's still people, but the panel members here, you can, basically corner them somewhere and direct your questions at them or any of us.
Thank you.
And we're happy to help out. And I want to thank them for joining us today and giving their time and expertise in this. So thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.